Valeria sat cross-legged on her plush, silk-covered bed, the opulence of her surroundings amplifying her sense of entrapment. The crystal chandelier above shimmered like a constellation of diamonds, casting flickering shadows against the pale pink walls adorned with framed portraits of her ancestors, each one gazing down on her with a sense of expectation she could no longer bear. The soft hum of her smartphone vibrated against the soft fabric, drawing her attention back to the digital world, where the lives of others seemed infinitely more vibrant than her own. With a flick of her thumb, she scrolled through her social media feed, her heart sinking with each post. There were Ethan's family gatherings, lavish parties filled with laughter, luxury, and an air of camaraderie that felt so distant to her now. Pictures of her boyfriend, Ethan, smiling with his arm around his mother, his father's proud smile in the background, and cousins dressed to the nines, all radiating joy and connection. Valeria's chest tightened as she felt the familiar pang of isolation, a sensation that had grown into an unwelcome companion in her life. "What do they have that I don't?" she murmured to herself, the question echoing in the silence of her room. It was a question she had asked countless times, and the answer always eluded her. The wealth, the privilege, the effortless grace with which they navigated their world, it all felt so foreign to Valeria, who had grown tired of the confines her upbringing imposed on her. The parties, the expectations, the constant parade of people who only seemed to value her for her family name. It was all suffocating. She tossed the phone aside, the screen now reflecting a distorted image of her discontent. Valeria felt a deep-seated yearning for authenticity, the kind of authenticity she believed Ethan and his family possessed. It was a craving that twisted in her gut, compelling her to dream up a plan that could lead her out of her gilded cage. The idea struck her suddenly, like a lightning bolt illuminating her dimly lit thoughts. Why not become a part of their world, she whispered to herself, her heart racing with the thrill of rebellion. I could pose as a maid. Yes, Clara sounds perfect. The name rolled off her tongue, and with it came a rush of exhilaration. She imagined slipping away from the confines of her life into the role of someone entirely different, someone ordinary, unburdened by the weight of expectation. The more she thought about it, the more appealing the idea became. Valeria envisioned herself walking through the grand halls of Ethan's family mansion, dressed in a simple maid's uniform, invisible yet observant. She would blend in with the background, eavesdropping on conversations, gathering secrets, unearthing the truths that lay hidden beneath the surface of their glamorous lives. With renewed determination, Valeria began to plan her transformation. She would need a fake identity, a job, anything to get her inside Ethan's world without raising suspicion. The thought of being Clara excited her. She could be free from the constraints of her name, her lineage, and her family's expectations. For the first time in a long while, she felt a flicker of hope. Later that week, Valeria took the plunge. After some research and a few discreet inquiries, she managed to secure a position under the alias Clara. She arranged to meet with the stern housekeeper of the mansion, Mrs. Hawthorne, who was known for her no-nonsense attitude and impeccable standards. Valeria felt a surge of nerves as she prepared for the meeting, her heart racing at the thought of stepping into the world of the man she loved, albeit under a deceptive guise. On the day of her first shift, Valeria stood before her closet, staring at the crisp black and white maid uniform she had purchased. The fabric felt foreign against her skin, a symbol of the life she was about to embark on. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for what lay ahead. Her reflection in the mirror revealed a stranger, an ordinary girl, transformed into Clara, the maid. It was both exhilarating and terrifying. As she approached the grand mansion, its imposing structure loomed before her, a castle of secrets waiting to be uncovered. The manicured gardens, the sprawling driveway, and the intricate details of the architecture overwhelmed her senses. She could hear the faint sound of laughter inside, a stark reminder of the life of luxury that existed beyond her reach. But she pushed those thoughts aside, focusing on her purpose. "Clara, is it?" Mrs. Hawthorne's voice was sharp and commanding as she greeted Valeria at the door. The older woman's eyes narrowed as she scrutinized Valeria's uniform. "You'll need to keep your head down and work hard. This family expects nothing less than perfection." "Yes, Mom," Valeria replied, her voice steady despite the anxiety bubbling within her. She followed Mrs. Hawthorne into the mansion, the air thick with the scent of polished wood and fresh flowers. Each step deeper into the house heightened her excitement, but also her anxiety. What secrets did this family hide behind their perfect facade? "Start in the kitchen," Mrs. Hawthorne instructed, her tone dismissive as she waved a hand. "The cook will show you the ropes. We have a busy day ahead." Valeria nodded, feeling a mix of exhilaration and trepidation. As she stepped into the kitchen, the clattering of pots and pans greeted her. The cook, a rotund woman with flour-dusted hands, looked up from her task and offered a brief nod. "New girl, huh? You'll have to learn fast. We don't have time for slackers around here," the cook said, her voice gruff but not unkind. "Yes, ma'am. I'm ready to work," Valeria replied, her heart pounding. The kitchen was alive with activity, and she quickly immersed herself in the tasks assigned to her. Chopping vegetables, washing dishes, and keeping the kitchen tidy, she felt a sense of purpose she hadn't experienced in a long time. As the day unfolded, Valeria found herself stealing glances at the family members who floated in and out of the kitchen. Their laughter and cheerful banter contrasted sharply with the serious atmosphere of her own upbringing. She caught glimpses of Ethan, his warm smile lighting up the room. For a moment her heart swelled with affection, but it was quickly overshadowed by the reality of her disguise. He had no idea she was there, and the thought brought a pang of guilt. "What's with the long face?" the cook asked, breaking Valeria's reverie. "Just adjusting, I guess," Valeria replied, forcing a smile. She felt a sense of camaraderie with the other staff, who shared knowing glances and whispered secrets amidst the hustle of the kitchen. As the afternoon wore on, Valeria's excitement was tempered by a growing sense of anxiety. The more she observed Ethan's family, the more she felt the gravity of her situation. The mansion, with its grand decor and polished surfaces, seemed to conceal layers of complexity that she had yet to unravel. There was a certain tension in the air, an undercurrent of secrets that made her instinctively cautious. "Clara, come help me with these linens." Mrs. Hawthorne's voice cut through her thoughts, and Valeria hurried to follow her command, her heart racing at the prospect of further immersion into this world. As she folded the pristine linens, Valeria couldn't shake the feeling that she was stepping into a narrative far more intricate than she had anticipated. The laughter she had heard earlier now felt like a facade, concealing deeper truths that begged to be uncovered. But she was determined to play her part, to dig deeper into the lives of the people who had captivated her heart. With each passing moment, Valeria realized that this was just the beginning of a journey that would challenge her in ways she couldn't yet imagine. She was about to step into the heart of a family shrouded in mystery, and with it, the potential for revelation, danger, and perhaps the truth about herself. Little did she know, the secrets she was about to uncover would not only test her courage, but also redefine everything she thought she knew about love, loyalty, and the lengths one would go to for the truth. As Clara, Valeria moved through the expansive halls of the mansion, her heart raced with both excitement and trepidation. The opulence surrounding her was overwhelming, yet it felt so foreign. She had spent most of her life in luxury, but this was different. This was a world where she was a mere maid, an outsider, observing the dynamics of a family whose secrets she had yet to uncover. Valeria set her sights on the family members as they drifted through the living room, their conversations punctuated by polite laughter and the clinking of fine china. She caught sight of Ethan's mother, Veronica, whose icy demeanor sent a chill down Valeria's spine. The woman held herself with an air of superiority, her perfectly coiffed hair framing a face that rarely broke into a smile. Valeria couldn't help but wonder what lay beneath that polished exterior. "Clara, dear, could you please bring me some more tea?" Veronica's voice was sharp, cutting through the air with an authority that made Valeria flinch. "Of course, ma'am," Valeria replied, her voice steady despite her nerves. She hurried to the kitchen where the aroma of freshly brewed tea mingled with the scent of baked goods. As she poured the tea into a delicate china cup, Valeria overheard snippets of conversation between the staff. The housekeeper, a no-nonsense woman named Agnes, was discussing the upcoming charity gala that the family was hosting. "Have you heard about the financial troubles?" Agnes whispered to another maid. They say the estate is in disarray, but of course the guests will see nothing but the glittering facade. Valeria's ears perked up. Financial troubles. That was the first hint she had encountered about the family's hidden issues. She finished pouring the tea and returned to the living room, where Veronica awaited her with a piercing gaze. "Here you go, ma'am," Valeria said, offering the cup with a slight bow. Veronica took the tea without a word, her eyes narrowing as she observed Clara. Valeria held her breath, scanning the room for Ethan, hoping for a reassuring smile. But he was nowhere to be seen, lost among the shadows of the mansion. A few moments later, the atmosphere shifted dramatically as Charles, Ethan's father, entered the room. He carried himself with an air of confidence, yet his presence was accompanied by a tension that Valeria couldn't quite place. The moment he stepped in, Veronica's demeanor changed entirely. Her coldness was replaced by a practiced warmth, but Valeria could still sense the underlying frost. "Darling," Veronica said, her voice sweetening. "Clara here has been such a diligent worker. She's proving to be quite the asset." Charles nodded, his eyes scanning the room before landing on Valeria. "Good to have you on board, Clara. We appreciate your hard work." Valeria managed a polite smile, her heart racing as she wondered what he truly thought of her. Did he suspect that she was more than just a maid? As the evening progressed, Valeria noticed the subtle interactions that hinted at deeper issues within the family. Charles and Veronica exchanged glances, filled with unspoken words, their conversations often laced with tension. It was as if they were playing a game in which the stakes were higher than Valeria could imagine. Later that evening, while cleaning the dining room, Valeria overheard a heated argument coming from the study. Curiosity piqued, she crept closer, careful to remain unseen. "I can't believe you've let it get this far, Charles." Veronica's voice was raised, a blend of frustration and despair. "We can't keep pretending everything is fine. The debts are piling up, and if we don't act soon, we'll lose everything." Valeria's heart raced. "Debts? What debts?" She strained to hear more, but the conversation shifted, and all she could catch were snippets. "There are ways to salvage this, but you need to trust me," Charles responded, his tone low and urgent. "We can't afford to show any weakness now." Valeria's mind whirled. The glamorous lifestyle she had observed was beginning to crack. She had assumed that Ethan's family led a charmed life, but now it seemed that everything was a facade, teetering on the brink of collapse. After the argument faded, Valeria returned to her duties, her mind racing with thoughts of what she had just overheard. She needed to dig deeper, to uncover the truth behind the family's financial struggles. As Clara, she was in a unique position to observe, without drawing suspicion. Later that night, while cleaning the study, Valeria's curiosity got the better of her. She noticed a faint outline on the surface of an ornate desk, leading her to a hidden drawer. Heart pounding, she pulled it open and gasped at the contents inside. Old photographs, yellowed with age, spilled out, depicting a younger Charles and Veronica at various events, their smiles bright, but their eyes lacking warmth. There were also documents, letters and legal papers that hinted at a family scandal. Words like embezzlement and estrangement caught her eye, sending a shiver down her spine. "What is this?" she whispered to herself, her fingers trembling as she rifled through the papers. A photograph slipped out, and she caught a glimpse of a familiar face, an estranged relative of Ethan's, someone she had heard whispers about in the staff quarters. Suddenly the door creaked open, and Valeria quickly shoved the documents back into the drawer, her heart racing. It was Ethan, his expression shifting from surprise to confusion. "Clara, what are you doing in here?" he asked, his brow furrowed as he stepped inside. Valeria's mind raced, scrambling for a plausible excuse. "I was just tidying up, sir. The study needed some attention," she replied, forcing a smile. Ethan studied her for a moment, his gaze piercing. "You know, you don't have to call me sir. Just Ethan is fine." Valeria nodded, her heart pounding as she met his gaze. She could feel the weight of the secrets she had stumbled upon pressing down on her. "Of course, Ethan. I just thought it was appropriate." He shrugged, seemingly unfazed by her nervousness. "You're doing a great job, by the way. The house has never looked better." "Thank you," Valeria said, grateful for the compliment, but acutely aware that she needed to tread carefully. She was walking a tightrope, balancing her growing feelings for Ethan with the secrets she was uncovering about his family. As Ethan turned to leave, Valeria felt a surge of determination. She couldn't let fear hold her back. She needed to find out the truth, not just for herself but for Ethan as well. The man she was falling in love with deserved to know the reality of his family's situation, no matter how dangerous it might be. With her resolve steeled, Valeria returned to her duties, her mind occupied with the shadows lurking behind the mansion's pristine facade. She would uncover the secrets hidden within these walls, no matter the cost. Valeria had settled into her role as Clara, the maid, with a mixture of trepidation and determination. She had spent the last few days observing the family dynamics at Ethan's mansion, her heart racing with excitement at the secrets she had begun to unravel. Today she felt a rush of adrenaline as she entered the kitchen where the other staff gathered, exchanging hushed whispers and knowing glances. "Clara, come here," called out Margaret, the head cook, her voice sharp yet inviting. Margaret was a stout woman with a warm smile that belied her fierce demeanor. She had taken Valeria under her wing, perhaps sensing the girl's eagerness to fit in. "We're just talking about the Whitmore family. You know they're not as perfect as they look, right?" Valeria leaned closer, her curiosity piqued. "Really? What do you mean?" Margaret glanced around, ensuring no one else was listening. "There's an estranged relative, a cousin or something, who was cut off from the family years ago. Rumor has it they got into some trouble, and the Whitmores wanted to distance themselves." As Valeria listened, she felt a thrill of discovery. What did this relative do? "They say he got involved in some shady business, something with money. The family doesn't like to talk about it, but it's a big deal. You know how those rich folks are, always trying to maintain their image." Valeria nodded, her mind racing. This was the kind of information she had hoped to find. "Do you think they're still connected to him?" Margaret shrugged, her expression thoughtful. "I wouldn't be surprised. The way they act, always looking over their shoulders, it's like they're hiding something. Just be careful, Clara. You never know how deep the secrets run." As the conversation shifted to the day's menu, Valeria's thoughts remained with the estranged relative. She had to dig deeper. That night, after finishing her chores, she slipped away to explore the mansion's dusty corners. Her heart thumped in her chest as she passed the ornate portraits lining the walls, their eyes seeming to follow her every move. She reached the study, the room that had piqued her curiosity before. The door creaked open, and she slipped inside, the scent of old books and polished wood enveloping her. It was dimly lit, shadows dancing ominously as she approached the desk. She felt like an intruder in a sacred space, but she had to know more. Valeria rifled through the drawers, her fingers trembling with anticipation. She found nothing but mundane papers until, at the very back of the last drawer, she discovered a small, locked box. Her heart raced as she examined it closely. There was no key in sight, but the box felt heavy with secrets. She glanced around, half expecting someone to catch her, before she began to search for a way to open it. Using a small hairpin she had tucked away, she carefully pried at the lock. After a few tense moments, the latch clicked open. Inside, she found old photographs, some faded, others vibrant, depicting family gatherings, but one picture caught her attention. It showed a man standing apart from the rest, his expression dark and brooding. "Who are you?" Valeria whispered to the photograph, feeling a strange connection to the man. She flipped the picture over and found a name scrawled in elegant script. Victor Whitmore. Her mind raced. Victor Whitmore was the estranged relative Margaret had mentioned. She slid the photograph into her pocket, feeling the weight of the discovery settle heavily on her. She needed to find out more about him, and she needed to do it quickly. The next morning, Valeria approached Margaret again, trying to sound casual. "Do you know anything more about Victor Whitmore, the one who got into trouble?" Margaret's eyes widened slightly. "Why do you want to know, Clara? It's best to leave that family history buried." "No, I just heard his name, and I'm curious. The family seems to be hiding something, and I want to understand." With a hesitant sigh, Margaret leaned closer. "All right, but you didn't hear this from me. Victor was into some illegal dealings, and when he tried to expose the family's business practices, they cut him off completely. They wanted to keep their hands clean, you see. But he knows things, dangerous things. Valeria's heart sank. Dangerous things. It was getting more complicated than she had imagined. Do you think he would ever come back? Or that Ethan knows about him? Margaret shook her head. I doubt it. The family has probably done everything to keep him away. And Ethan, he's just like his parents, oblivious to the real world. Oblivious? Valeria repeated, her mind racing. She had always seen Ethan as charming and kind, but she was beginning to wonder how much he knew about his own family's dark past. That evening, Valeria decided to confront Ethan about Victor. They had spent the day together, and she could sense a shift in their relationship. As they sat on the terrace under the stars, sipping on glasses of sparkling water, she found the courage to bring it up. "Ethan, can I ask you something?" she began, her voice steady despite the nervous fluttering in her stomach. "Of course, Clara. What's on your mind?" he replied, his attention fully on her. "It's about your family, and a relative named Victor Whitmore. I heard some things, and I'm curious. Do you know what happened to him?" Ethan's expression darkened. "Victor? That's not a topic I want to discuss." "Why not? He's your family, isn't he? Surely you must know something." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It's complicated. He was family, but he made choices that hurt us all. We don't talk about him for a reason." Valeria pressed on. "But don't you want to know what really happened? What he knows?" Ethan's gaze turned sharp. "You shouldn't concern yourself with that. It's in the past for a reason." Valeria's heart sank. The more she dug, the more she realized how entrenched Ethan was in this world of secrets. She felt torn between her feelings for him and the growing need to uncover the truth. "Ethan, I think there's more to this story. I want to help you understand." "Clara, please, just drop it," he said, his voice firm. The tension hung thick in the air as Valeria tried to process his reaction. She could feel the walls closing in around her, the weight of his family's secrets pressing down hard. She had to continue her investigation, no matter the cost. That night, as she lay in her small room in the mansion, Valeria couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. The shadows seemed to shift ominously, and she felt an unsettling chill run down her spine. What else was hidden behind the glimmering facade of the Whitmores? And how deep did the darkness run? With a renewed sense of determination, she resolved to uncover the truth about Victor Whitmore and the secrets that lay buried within the walls of the mansion. She could no longer ignore the whispers of danger that surrounded Ethan's family, and she knew that her journey was just beginning. Valeria stood in the dimly lit kitchen, the faint aroma of burnt toast wafting through the air as she attempted to prepare breakfast for Ethan's family. The clatter of dishes and the low murmur of voices from the dining room only heightened her sense of urgency. Just moments ago, she had overheard a conversation between the housekeeper and the cook about the upcoming family event, a gala that would mark a significant business deal for the family. A deal Valeria suspected was tied to the troubling secrets she had unearthed. With her heart racing, she wiped her hands on her apron and peered through the doorway into the dining room. Ethan sat at the head of the table, his laughter mingling with the clinking of silverware. His mother, Veronica, sat opposite him, her expression a mask of calculated indifference. Valeria's heart ached at the sight. She had grown fond of Ethan during their brief time together, but the weight of his family's hidden narrative loomed over her like a storm cloud. "Clara, are you going to dawdle all day?" Veronica's sharp voice broke through Valeria's thoughts, drawing her back to reality. "We need more coffee." "Yes, Mum." "Right away," Valeria replied, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. She quickly poured coffee into a silver pot, her mind racing as she tried to piece together the snippets of overheard conversations. As she returned to the dining room, she caught Ethan's eye. He smiled at her, and for a brief moment the tension melted away. But then she remembered her mission. "Ethan," Valeria said, her voice low enough to avoid Veronica's sharp ears, "can we talk later? I need to discuss something important." "Of course," Ethan replied, his brow furrowing slightly in concern. "Is everything all right?" "Just something I need to share with you," she said, trying to convey the gravity of the situation without alarming him. Valeria's heart sank as she returned to the kitchen, knowing she could no longer ignore the dark shadows lurking in Ethan's family. She had witnessed enough to understand that their lives were intertwined with secrets and lies. Later that day, after the family had left for their afternoon appointments, Valeria seized the opportunity to delve deeper into her investigation. She slipped through the corridors of the mansion, her footsteps soft against the polished marble floors. She had discovered a small library earlier that seemed untouched by time, filled with books that whispered of the family's legacy. As she entered the library, she was immediately drawn to a large, ornate desk that dominated the room. The surface was cluttered with papers, and Valeria's fingers itched to sift through them. She began to sort through the documents, her heart racing with the thrill of discovery. "Clara!" A voice interrupted her concentration. Valeria spun around, her heart pounding. It was Ethan, standing in the doorway, with a look of surprise on his face. "What are you doing here?" he asked, stepping inside the room. "I was just organizing," she stammered, her mind racing for a plausible excuse. Ethan raised an eyebrow, his gaze piercing. "You're not just a maid, are you? What's going on?" Valeria hesitated, her heart aching at the thought of deceiving him. I've found some things, Ethan. Things about your family. I think there's more going on than you realize." Ethan's expression shifted from confusion to concern. "What do you mean?" Before she could respond, Veronica's voice echoed down the hallway, cutting their conversation short. "Ethan, come here. We need to discuss the gala details." "Just a moment," Ethan called back before turning to Valeria, determination in his eyes. "We'll talk later. You can't keep this from me." Valeria nodded, her heart heavy with the burden of her discoveries. As Ethan left the room, she returned her focus to the desk, hoping to find something, anything that could shed light on the family's secrets. She rifled through the papers, her hands trembling as she uncovered a series of contracts and correspondence that hinted at shady dealings. The names mentioned were unfamiliar, but the language was clear. They were discussing investments that seemed far too risky, and the tone suggested desperation. Suddenly, her phone buzzed in her pocket, startling her. It was a message from one of the other staff members, a quiet but observant woman named Lila. "I heard something about the gala. You should be careful. There are people coming who are not what they seem." Valeria's pulse quickened. She quickly typed back, "What do you know?" Before she could send the message, the door creaked open again, and this time it was Charles, Ethan's father, who entered the library. His presence was commanding, and Valeria felt her stomach drop. She had seen him only in passing, but there was something unsettling about his demeanor that made her instinctively wary. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his voice low and guarded. "Just cleaning," Valeria replied, forcing a smile. "I thought I'd organize the library a bit." He scrutinized her for a moment, his eyes narrowing. "Don't go through things that don't concern you. This family has enough complications without your meddling." Valeria felt a chill run down her spine, but she held her ground. "I'm just trying to help, sir." "Help?" he scoffed, crossing his arms. "You don't know what you're getting into, Clara. Best stay in your lane." With that, he turned on his heel and left, leaving Valeria breathless with the weight of his words. The threat was clear. She was delving into dangerous territory, and the stakes were higher than she had anticipated. As the hours passed, Valeria prepared for the gala with a sense of dread. She donned her maid's uniform, but the fabric felt heavier than usual, as if it were a shroud rather than a disguise. She glanced in the mirror, her reflection revealing a girl caught between two worlds. She was Clara, the maid, yet she felt more like Valeria, the heiress with a mission. When the evening arrived, the mansion transformed into a spectacle of elegance. Guests in glittering gowns and tailored suits mingled in the grand hall, laughter and music filling the air. Valeria moved through the crowd, serving drinks and hors d'oeuvres, her eyes scanning the room for Ethan. She needed to speak with him, to share everything she had uncovered. Finally, she spotted him across the room, deep in conversation with a group of men. Her heart raced as she approached, but before she could reach him, she noticed Charles slipping away from the party, his expression tense. Curiosity piqued, Valeria followed him discreetly, her instincts urging her to uncover what he was hiding. She trailed him through a side door and into a dimly lit corridor, her heart pounding in her chest. At the end of the hall, she peered around the corner and gasped. Charles was standing in a secluded alcove, speaking in hushed tones with two men who looked out of place amidst the glamour of the gala. They wore dark suits and carried an air of menace about them. "Everything is in place for the deal," Charles said, his voice low. "We just need to ensure that no one finds out about our previous arrangements." Valeria's breath caught in her throat as she focused on their conversation. It was more than just business. It was a web of deceit that threatened to ensnare everyone involved. One of the men leaned closer, his voice a low growl. "If things go sideways, we're not taking the fall for you. You need to keep your family in line." Charles's jaw clenched. "I know what's at stake. Just make sure the deal goes through and we'll all come out ahead." Valeria's heart raced as she realized the gravity of the situation. This was the evidence she needed, the proof that Ethan's family was entangled in something dangerous and illegal. They were not just wealthy, they were desperate and willing to do anything to protect their secrets. She stepped back, her mind racing with the implications of what she had just witnessed. She had to find Ethan to warn him before it was too late. But as she turned to leave, she bumped into someone, almost losing her balance. "Clara?" It was Lila, her eyes wide with concern. "What are you doing here? You shouldn't be in this part of the house." Valeria hesitated, unsure of how much to reveal. "I saw something about the family's business." Lila's face paled. "You need to be careful. They won't hesitate to protect their secrets, especially if they think you know too much." "I have to tell Ethan," Valeria insisted, her resolve hardening. "He needs to know what his father is involved in." "Are you sure that's wise?" Lila's voice was low, laced with anxiety. "You don't know what they're capable of." "I can't just stand by and let them continue this," Valeria said, her voice fierce. "Ethan deserves the truth, even if it means putting myself at risk." Lila looked torn, her gaze shifting down the corridor. "I understand, but promise me you'll be careful. They have eyes everywhere." With a determined nod, Valeria rushed back toward the gala, her heart pounding as she scanned the crowd for Ethan. She had to find him before it was too late, before the truth slipped through her fingers like sand. The stakes had never been higher, and the clock was ticking. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the opulent mansion where Valeria, under the guise of Clara, was now deeply entangled in a web of secrets. The atmosphere felt heavier than usual, thick with unspoken words and hidden agendas. As she scrubbed the marble floors of the grand hallway, her heart raced with the knowledge she had gained over the past weeks. While she worked, Valeria overheard snippets of conversations from the drawing room, her heart sinking with each word. "It's not just about the money anymore, Charles. We have to confront this before it spirals out of control." Veronica's voice rang out, sharp and anxious. Valeria's grip tightened on the mop handle, her instincts screaming for her to listen closely. "It's too dangerous, Veronica." "You know that," Charles replied, his voice low and gravelly, filled with a tension that made Valeria's skin crawl. "We can handle this quietly. We've always managed to keep things under wraps." Valeria moved closer, stealthily pushing the cleaning cart out of sight. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. These were not the casual discussions of a typical family. This was a conversation laced with fear and dread. She held her breath, straining to catch every word. "Do you think they will find out? If they do, we will lose everything." Veronica's tone shifted, a mix of desperation and anger. "We can't let that happen." The weight of their words settled heavily on Valeria. What were they hiding? The thought of confronting Ethan with this information twisted in her stomach. She loved him, but he was part of this family, an intricate part of the very secrets she was unraveling. Would he believe her? Determined to uncover the truth, Valeria decided to gather more evidence. That night, as the family settled into their nightly routines, she crept into the study once more. The hidden drawer she had found before beckoned her like a siren's call. She rummaged through the photographs and documents, piecing together snippets of a dark family history that hinted at betrayal, financial ruin, and a legacy built on lies. As she sifted through the papers, her fingers brushed against a document that felt different, thicker, more substantial. Pulling it out, she realized it was a legal contract, one that seemed to involve shady business dealings and unfamiliar names. Her pulse quickened. She snapped a photo with her phone, knowing she needed to document everything. This was the evidence she needed to confront Ethan and, if necessary, protect herself. The next day, Valeria felt the weight of her secret pressing down on her as she served breakfast to the family. Ethan sat at the table, oblivious to the turmoil brewing within her. He smiled at her, his eyes bright with affection as he reached for a croissant. "You're doing a great job, Clara. I don't know what we'd do without you," he said, his voice warm and inviting. "Thank you, Ethan. I'm just happy to help," she replied, forcing a smile, her heart aching with the knowledge that her deception was about to shatter their fragile connection. Throughout the day, she wrestled with her decision. Should she reveal the truth to Ethan? Would he stand by her side when he learned who she truly was? The thought of losing him made her stomach churn. She needed to know if he was as entwined in his family's dark affairs as they seemed. That evening, as the family prepared for another lavish dinner, Valeria made her way to the kitchen to gather her thoughts. The staff bustled around her, laughter and chatter filling the air, a stark contrast to her internal struggle. "Everything okay, Clara?" asked Maria, one of the other maids, noticing Valeria's distant expression. "Just a little tired, I guess," Valeria replied, forcing a smile. Maria nodded knowingly, returning to her task. Valeria took a deep breath, steeling herself for what she had to do. She would gather her evidence and confront Ethan that night. As the family settled in the drawing room after dinner, Valeria felt the adrenaline coursing through her veins. She needed to act quickly. "Ethan, can we talk?" she asked, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside her. "Of course, Clara. What's on your mind?" He looked at her with genuine concern, his brow furrowing slightly. "Not here," she murmured, glancing nervously at his parents. She led him outside to the terrace, the cool night air wrapping around them like a balm. The stars twinkled above, but Valeria felt anything but calm. She took a deep breath, her heart pounding as she prepared to unveil her discoveries. "Ethan, I've been meaning to talk to you about your family." His expression shifted, a hint of wariness creeping in. "What about them?" "Things aren't what they seem. I've overheard conversations, and I've found documents that suggest your family is involved in something illegal." The words tumbled out, each syllable heavy with anxiety. Ethan's eyes widened, a flash of disbelief crossing his face. "What are you talking about? My family? They would never." "Ethan, please, just listen to me," Valeria interrupted, desperation creeping into her voice. "I found contracts, photographs. There's something dark lurking beneath the surface." He stepped back, his expression shifting from confusion to anger. "You're accusing my family of being criminals. You don't know what you're talking about." Valeria's heart sank. "I know it's hard to believe, but..." Just then the door swung open and Veronica stepped out onto the terrace, her eyes narrowing as she took in the scene. "What's going on here?" she demanded, her voice laced with authority and suspicion. Valeria's pulse raced. This was it, the confrontation she had feared. "I was just telling Ethan about some things I've discovered," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. Veronica's gaze hardened. "You have no business discussing family matters with my son. You're just a maid, Clara. Know your place." Valeria felt the heat rise to her cheeks, the insult igniting a fire within her. "I may be a maid, but that doesn't mean I don't deserve to know the truth. Your family is hiding something, and I intend to find out what it is." "Is that so?" Veronica stepped closer, her voice dripping with disdain. "If you continue to dig into our affairs, you might find yourself in a very precarious position. I can make your life very difficult, Clara. You don't want to cross me." Valeria's heart raced as she met Veronica's icy gaze. "I'm not afraid of you," she replied, surprising even herself with her boldness. Veronica's lips curled into a sinister smile, a glint of malice in her eyes. "You should be, my dear. You have no idea what you're getting into." As Valeria stood there, the weight of the threat settling heavily on her shoulders, she realized she was trapped in a nightmare. She had come to the mansion to uncover the truth, to protect herself and Ethan, but now the stakes had been raised. She was no longer just an observer. She was a player in a dangerous game, one that could cost her everything. Ethan looked between his mother and Valeria, confusion and concern etched on his face. "What is going on? Clara, what did you find?" Valeria opened her mouth to speak, to tell him everything, but the fear gripping her heart held her back. She could sense the tension in the air, the danger looming closer. The truth was closer than ever, but so was the threat of losing everything she had come to care about. Valeria felt the weight of the moment pressing upon her, her heart racing as Veronica's cold glare bore into her. The housekeeper, caught off guard by the tension in the room, stepped back, sensing the impending storm. Valeria's mind raced as she processed the threat that hung in the air. She had been so consumed by her quest for the truth. Now she stood on the precipice of a confrontation that could unravel everything. "Valeria, I suggest you leave this matter alone," Veronica said, her voice dripping with disdain. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." Valeria's breath caught in her throat. She had never felt so exposed, standing in the elegant parlor of Ethan's family mansion, where every corner held a secret. "I won't be intimidated," she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "You can't silence me. I know what's going on in this family." Just then, the door swung open, and Ethan stepped inside, his expression shifting from casual to alarmed in an instant. "What's happening here?" he demanded, his gaze darting between Valeria and his mother. "Ethan," Valeria said, her voice trembling slightly. "Your mother has been threatening me. She knows I've been looking into your family's secrets." Veronica's eyes narrowed as if trying to gauge Ethan's reaction. "You shouldn't be involved in this, Ethan. It's dangerous," she said, her tone shifting from authoritative to pleading, but Valeria could hear the underlying menace. Ethan's brow furrowed in confusion. "What secrets? What have you found?" Valeria hesitated, torn between the urge to spill everything and the fear of what that might mean for both of them. "I found documents, photographs, evidence of something terrible that your family is involved in." To her surprise, Ethan stepped closer, his eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that sent warmth flooding through her. "I already know, Valeria," he said softly, his voice low but firm. "I've known who you really are since the beginning." Valeria's heart raced as the realization hit her. What do you mean you know?" "I wanted to see if you would uncover the truth on your own," Ethan confessed, his gaze unwavering. "I thought if you could face my family's darkness without me, it would show me your strength and resolve. I had to know if you could handle it." Valeria's world spun around her. "You put me in danger? You let me—" "I had to trust you," he interrupted, his voice rising slightly. "I believed in you, Valeria, but we need to confront them together now. We can't let this go on any longer." Veronica's expression morphed from anger to disbelief. "You can't be serious, Ethan. You want to side with her against your own family?" "This isn't about sides, Mother," Ethan replied, his tone steady. "This is about the truth, about what's right, and what you're doing is wrong." Valeria's heart swelled with a mixture of fear and hope. Could they really confront Veronica and Charles together? She took a deep breath, gathering the courage she desperately needed. "We can expose them, Ethan. We have to show the world what they're hiding." Veronica's face darkened, and Valeria could see the wheels turning in her mind. "You think you can just waltz in here and take down this family? You have no idea what you're up against," she shot back, her voice trembling with anger. "We'll see about that," Ethan replied, his voice firm. "You've been living in a lie for too long, and it's time to face the consequences." In the tense silence that followed, Valeria felt an unexpected surge of strength. "Your family may have power and money, but that doesn't mean they can escape the truth. I've seen the documents. I know about the illegal deals, the threats, and the cover-ups." At that moment, Charles entered the room, his presence commanding and intimidating. He surveyed the scene, his eyes narrowing as he took in the charged atmosphere. "What's going on here?" he demanded, his voice echoing off the walls. "Dad, Valeria knows everything," Ethan said, his voice unwavering. "She's found out about the family's dealings, and we're not going to let you sweep this under the rug anymore." Charles's demeanor shifted, a mix of surprise and anger flashing across his face. "You should know better than to meddle in family affairs, Ethan. This isn't the way to handle things." Valeria stepped forward, emboldened by Ethan's support. Your family's affairs are hurting people, and you can't just ignore that. You need to be held accountable." "Accountable?" Charles scoffed, his voice dripping with contempt. "You think you can just walk in here and demand accountability? You have no idea what you're talking about." Ethan exchanged a glance with Valeria, a silent agreement passing between them. "We're done hiding from the truth, Dad," he said, his voice steady. "We're going to expose everything, and if you think you can threaten Valeria, you're mistaken." In that moment, the atmosphere shifted again, a palpable tension hanging in the air. Charles's expression hardened, and Valeria could see the gears turning in his mind. "You think you're so clever, don't you? But you'll regret this. You have no idea what I'm capable of," he warned, his voice low and menacing. Valeria felt a shiver run down her spine, but she stood her ground. "We're not afraid of you, Charles. You've built your empire on lies, and it's time for it to crumble." Suddenly, a figure stepped out from the shadows of the hallway, and Valeria's heart raced as she recognized him. It was Ethan's estranged relative, Marcus, the whistleblower she had heard about from the staff. He looked resolute, his eyes locked onto Charles with a fierce determination. "I've been waiting for the right moment to reveal the truth," Marcus declared, his voice unwavering, "and it looks like that moment is now." The room fell silent as everyone turned to Marcus, each person processing the weight of his words. "I have the evidence, the documents, everything you need to bring this family down," he continued, his gaze fierce. "You'll have to face the consequences of your actions, Charles." Ethan's eyes widened, a mix of surprise and relief washing over him. Valeria felt a rush of hope as she realized that their plan was finally coming together. "Together," she whispered to Ethan, "we can do this." "Yes," Ethan replied, his voice filled with determination. "We can end this once and for all." As they all stood together, Valeria, Ethan, and Marcus, facing the powerful figures of Veronica and Charles, Valeria felt a sense of unity and strength that she never thought possible. They were no longer alone, and the truth was finally within their grasp. The shadows of deception that had long loomed over Ethan's family were beginning to lift, and in that moment, Valeria knew that love and courage would prevail against even the darkest of secrets.